everybody. Welcome to an Autodesk Digital Talk. Today, we are lucky to have the talented team from WeFX join us to talk about their VFX work and the acclaimed series 1923. For the next hour, this is your time to connect, learn, and ask questions. And a quick FYI for everyone, there will be time for questions at the end of the webinar, and you can ask them in the Q&A box that you can see at the bottom of your screens, or just drop them in the chat. Feel free to say hi to one another. And then now happy to introduce Ryan from the WeFX team to kick it off, introduce the team, and start the presentation. So thanks, Ryan.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Ryan. I'm the VFX supervisor on the project. Joining with me today is our VFX 1923 team. On our CG side, we have our head of CG, Igor. We have Steve, our executive producer. We have Vidu, our lighting supervisor. Fernando, our senior animator. Lynn Sibley, our production manager. And unfortunately, we don't have Brandon here today, but still a big shout out to him since he contributed some amazing work to this project with us. So we are WeFX. We are a Toronto-based VFX studio founded 5 years ago in 2020. We pride ourselves on consistently producing top-tier blockbuster level visual effects while offering all the benefits of a boutique studio. You may have heard about us from our works in John Wick 4, from on MGM Plus, what we do in the shadows, the fall of the House of Usher, and of course, 1923. Before we start, I would like to show you our company reel. Let's play it. So today, the sequence we're gonna talk about is the horse chase scene in 1923 season 2. In the sequence, we see Pete was being chased by 2 other riders. His horse was exhausted and it eventually collapsed. So let's have a look at what we were dealing with. So there were 20 visual effects shots in the sequence. All of them involved some level of utilizing a digital horse. So for some shots, we use the horse to generate interaction dust elements to improve continuity in between shots. For hero shots, we created a photorealistic horse and a digital double of Pete to seamlessly blend between practical shots. So initially, we were given 3 months to deliver the work. This was a pretty challenging timeline because building high quality creatures and assets for such a hero sequence alone could easily take weeks to finish. So let alone rigging, animating, creating look depth, and rendering everything within such a short window. Additional to that, this being a Taylor Sheridan's show, the bar is very, very high, as he and his team are the people who have lived and worked with horses their entire life. So right off the bat, we knew that there wasn't much room for error, and all the details and nuances that we create will have to be pretty spot on. So the front end of our pipeline is pretty much all Maya. So we model, we rigged, we animated in Maya, everything then get passed to like through multiple stages of dynamics. And we use Arnold as our choice of render engine, which is also where we created our look depths and render with deep data. On the project management side, we use Flow PTR for tracking and we use RV Player for dailies review. So when we first started the project, the biggest hole to fill in the sequence is when the action of the horse collapses and Pete gets thrown out from the horse. So I was able to find some very hard to watch videos of horse accidents on racetracks, which our animation team then used to drive the actions of the horse collapse. We also reference and match move different takes of Pete riding the actual horse practically, so we could make sure the pacing, energy, movements, the looks, they are all consistent throughout the shots, throughout the sequence, and so that we could also maximize the believability of our work. So it's safe to say at the end, we are all pretty pleased with how it turns out. A big shout out to our team, our entire team here, not only just our department head here, but also every single individuals that contributed to the work. This is such a technically demanding and emotionally charged sequence. We were able to produce very hero quality creature and asset, despite all the challenges we were facing. It was still a very smooth sail, and the client and fans were definitely very happy. Um, I've always said one of the biggest compliments you can get working in visual effects is when you successfully manipulate reality to a point when the fans couldn't tell what is real, what is fake. Then you know you did a really good job. So you've heard enough from me. Now let's pass the spotlight to our team. So Steve, when you first get onto the project, um, how do you feel about the project and what were the challenges you were able to identify at the beginning?
Yeah, so when we started working with Kevin, the show side supervisor, it's worth mentioning that we worked with him on season one of 1923, had a very positive experience. We handled a large sequence again with lots of heavy CG. In that instance, it was a lot of water sims and sharks and fish, water interactivity, all of that material. So he knew that we were able to handle pretty challenging CG work. So this season, we were looking at a bunch of different animals that were placed throughout the season, and we were bidding with them, chatting with them, and we were definitely, after looking through them all, saying to ourselves, "Wow, the horse really would be hard. Of all the creatures that we're looking at working on, the horse sequence would be pretty much the toughest." And sure enough, Kevin and team decided that that was the right one for us to tackle. So we were again very up for the challenge, but going in, we knew that especially given the timeline, and as Ryan said, given how how precise they would know the material and know the horses that we're working with, we had to be like really, really on our A game here. luckily we were and were able to do it. But I mean, from a production standpoint, we had to, have multiple departments moving concurrently throughout the entire process, since from the minute of award until the minute of delivery. And so that took a large toll on our, or toll maybe the wrong word, but it took a lot of energy and focus from our production team to make sure that we kept all of the plates spinning at the same time. And in that, for the how of how we did that, I'd like to ask Lynn to step in.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, as Steve said, it was a lot of plates in the air, but it was pretty awesome. So we started with our animation team. They did our first like initial concept to send to client just to get buy-off on that, so that the other teams could start work. Like we did have to do a lot of adjustments per shot, but we actually did a lot of our work in that sort of main pass inside the horse asset. Because we were constantly testing within all of departments. By the time we got animation approved on a shot, we were able to very rapidly move through the pipeline. Lighting had already been tested, the sims were approved, they just needed to be rerun on the final animation, the comp was already set up. So working in one continuous pass also had a lot of efficiencies for us. Sims could be run on the full cycle, so that avoided issues with continuity. We could also run full lighting tests or like breakout lighting tests of each individual shot, and we could call out areas really early that needed more specific look dev or lighting updates. That was done very early in the process. The look and the lighting of our horse was locked before all of the individual elements on most of the shots, which meant that the comp team was actually getting started really early in the process. So we were using deep compositing, which was slower, but it also meant that lighting could deliver individual elements before everything in the shot was done. So that gave us a lot of flexibility to approve parts of the work all the way through the pipe without completing everything. For example, like our dust sim and our ground plane, they were rendered very early, and comp could do all the work to integrate those into the plate before the animation was going. And you can see on the slide here, we were getting publishes from every department at the same time. So you might review a shot in animation and in comp on the same day for the same thing. So it was pretty great. But those of you in production might be sitting there now going, oh, so you're tracking that work in the shot, in the asset, different things per department per shot. So like our dust sim, for example, was done in our main pass, but things like saddle animation and simulation were being done in one or the other. So that was crucial that we used Flow for this and kept everything really tight. Our team needed to know the paths where they were picking things up. They needed to know the current approvals. This was especially crucial for our lighting team, who had to pick up the final work for everything. So they needed to make sure that they were getting the right thing. They needed to know whether it was coming from the asset, whether it was coming from the shot. So Prod worked with everyone to make sure that the correct pathing information, the correct publishes were available. And then we used this to create like a simple spreadsheet that linked to those publishes so that our artists could check visually, find the path that they needed, and make sure that everything was there and everything was correct. So that's how we handled it from the production side, but let's hear about more of the fun stuff, how we actually made the visuals.
Awesome. So, like, Fernando, you led the animation on the horse, which is definitely the core of this simultaneous workflow. Tell us about how you and different departments work together and what challenges you went through.
Thank you, Ryan. Hey, everyone. So, yeah, this animation was definitely challenging. First, because we had a really short timeline. So we started animating using an in-house rig, horse rig that we had in VFX, because we had no time to waste, right? And we did a run cycle. We adjusted the style because although the reference of horses falling, which were very ugly to see, but they were from horse races, we had to do a different run cycle. It was a desperate horse, a horse that was becoming more and more exhausted until the point it would crash. We don't have actually reference of horses running into exhaustion, so we had to create that. But the challenging was also it was a very big. The horse was very big on screen, like a really close up. He was a hero. We had to work with facial expressions for a horse. and that was also needed a lot of reference. We fully animated in Maya, and when we finally had the final model and rig, we also had an extra layer of details to work on, like the muscles and skins and details on the face. And not to mention, this was like a back and forth thing. So sometimes we had the horse being rendered, but he had to go back to modeling and rigging to add more details so animation could work on and send again to CFX, effects, and lighting. On the technical aspect, the challenging was being the center of this action and to support all the departments. So at the same time, we had like grooming and CFX working on the hair, on the tail, on sculpting, and we had effects dealing with the reactions of the ground and the layout, like dirt and grass, and but also the facial stuff happening all around, like saliva and blood. And we had to sync the nostrils opening with the smoke effects from the breathing of the horse, and be sure to send all of this to lighting and to all departments and to production, right? To keep production in touch. The animators did a great job. We had moments that we were working at the same time in the same shots. Like I was working on the horse, and other animators like Maria and Mint were working on the lower body of Pete and the bag as well. The bag was full CG. And speaking of that, the match move and the camera tracking was not easy. The actor in the set, the filming set, he was actually on a ladder and he was pretending he was on a horse. So he was moving up and down and looking back, and everything, the amount of going up and down, the hands position, the pace of going up and down and throwing himself on the ladder was not actually 100% matching the horse movement. So we in animation, we had to readjust 100% the camera position, the camera move, and all of that in order to make everything fit and work correctly. But yeah, at the end, it was challenging, but enjoyable. And we are very happy. And like Ryan mentioned, we are very happy with the repercussion in social media and the viewers that were asking themselves if we actually killed the horse.
Definitely. So obviously, when a horse like this big occupying such big portion of the frame, the model and the shading, everything as a look will have to be just as important as the animation. So Igor, tell us about the process of how we modeled all these intricate models, like, because the horse is not just a horse, obviously. There are so many things being carried, and also Pete, the rider. So walk us through the process of it.
For sure. Thanks, Ryan. So, yeah, when we first looked at the asset for the show, all the assets, we knew it was going to be quite a bit technical and artistic challenge. Horses are tricky to replicate. They're familiar to everyone, but then at the same time, the audience are good at spotting when something looks off. Also, this sequence had some hero shots, close-ups with sunlit and revealing lighting. So the bar was quite high. We began with scans of the horse, which were pretty good, but scanning a horse is never simple. The animal doesn't stay perfectly still. You can't exactly position it however you want to have a foundation for the sculpt. So we had 3 different scans with variations. So we had one with the saddle, one without, mouth open and mouth closed. And then the sculpting team used that to build sort of the base model based on these references, and then also utilizing a lot of references from the anatomy, the muscles, the skin details. But yeah, at the same time, the scans, they give us the flexibility and sculpting reference we needed to cover the variety of looks across the sequence. And then moving to the anatomy, we had to build the horse from inside out. We created a model with underlying skeleton, the muscle geometry, which was critical for realism once it was simulated. In this sequence with fast action and heavy motion blur, subtle details tend to disappear. So we actually had to push the definition of muscles and details a little further so they remain visible in the final renders. This extra anatomical depth gave us a foundation for the groom and the shading and material work that followed. We constantly went back and forth with the groom creature and the look dev teams, all working in unison. So because the horses have big muscle groups that flex visibly under the skin, and you have veins that pop out under the fur, and then you also have the fur, the classic wavy highlights on the fur with like anisotropic reflection. So this presented us with a challenge. If we had high density of fur, it would be really heavy and it would hide some of the details in the sculpt, like the veins, some of the muscle definitions. So after multiple iterations, we ended up with a hybrid system, a surface material for the skin with these wavy speculars, the anisotropic reflections, and the displacement details. And then on top of it, we had just enough density for the groom to reveal all these little details, but also give you, a proper furry, fuzzy look. Also, the textures and the materials had to be one-to-one with the practical. So we had to really dial in the hues or the different color variations in the textures to match the practical horse. And to make it look alive, because some of the shots required, you basically had, the full muzzle of the horse in the frame. So you could see the eyes, you could see the horror of in the eyes of the horse, right? So we had to dial in the wetness and the sharp speck in the eyes of the horse to make it look more realistic. And at the same time, it wasn't just a horse. Every piece of the gear, every accessory had to hold up, which meant detailed texturing and shading to match the practical assets. Even the blanket behind the saddle needed a groom to make it look like a fuzzy fabric. We also had to create a digidouble for the rider, Pete. And again, a high detail sculpt based on the scan with textures and materials that match the real actor. His clothing, the groom with the braids, and then actually, beads in the braids. And on top of this, every piece of all these elements had to be prepped to be simmable and to cut with the sequence, because everything is moving, everything is sort of flying around. So because of the timeline, we didn't have the luxury of doing things one after the other. And because of this, look, the room, CFX, and lighting, they were all developing in parallel. Our tests were happening directly in shots, often with incomplete assets, work in progress, some R&D, yeah, all kinds of tests. But it was sort of an efficient chaos. Problems were caught early, and we could iterate quickly. And yeah, we were working in context with the shots and the collaboration between the departments. This is really what made it work.
Awesome. Yeah, the collaboration definitely bring us like a good harmony that give us an edge to get to the desired look a lot sooner. So sounds like lighting is definitely one of the key component to how we made this happen. We do. There was a lot of things going on every single shot. So what is the recipe for the sequence in terms of lighting, and what challenges did you run into?
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, there were several challenges going on, specifically from a lighting and rendering standpoint. Some of the most obvious ones were for the entire sequence, we had hero CG assets that was covering majority of the frame, including the horse and Pete. Most of the plate lighting was quite strong backlit rim lighting with bright sunlight, so there was no hiding of any imperfections or anything, so everything had to be spot on with our renders. Also, there was very heavy horse grooms and character grooms as well, which had to be integrated and rendered. Igor mentioned as well about specular anisotropy in the shaders and lots of hair and fur with a lot of fine detail. So we already knew that sampling was going to be an issue right from the get-go. Our awesome FX team gave us tons and tons of amazing dust VDBs and volumes and debris layers as well, which had to be rendered. So that was an additional level of challenge that had to be thought after. And last but not least, as you can see here, the entire background is also CG. So our awesome environment team actually put together this environment with tons of CG grass, foliage, and rocks. So one of the biggest challenges from lighting and rendering perspective was all of these layers having to interact with each other. So we had to set up or design a render layering system in such a way that we could ensure rapid iterations and at the same time provide all the necessary AOVs and passes required by the compositing department to perform any post-render tweaks and stuff. So this is wherein we sat together early on as a team and decided that we would be going forward with rendering DPXRs to solve and mitigate this kind of problem. So again, some of the key approaches that we took in Arnold specifically, we rendered every single shot with Arnold, and it was Arnold Core 7.2.4.1. We sat down and we identified a few key shots early on in the sequence, and we already had a lighting setup ready for the look devs and the test animations early on. So that really helped us catch a lot of issues early on before we even went forward. For our rendering side of things, we rendered 3 EXRs for every single render layer. We had a beauty EXR, which contained all our pearl light AOVs. We had a utility EXR, which contained all the extra matte AOVs, matte channels, positions, normal, Z-depth, etc. And the third one was our deep EXRs, which contained the deep data for the depth pass. The combined file size for all these 3 passes for a single render layer was approximately 2 GB per frame for a 5K render resolution. So that was another challenge, as in we had to keep an eye on the file IO and the disk size as well. We also rendered a separate motion vector pass for a few shots, which enabled the compositing artist to enhance the action after the render was done as well. Also, we took advantage of the dust and volume rendering optimizations present in Arnold. On the top of my head, I can remember we used the step scale parameter in Arnold, which really helped us speed up renders with minimal loss of detail. And finally, we also had a lot of additional look dev in shots for additional effects elements like blood, saliva, and breath, smoky breath from the horse. So all of those were done using the Arnold standard surface, which worked fantastically. And yeah, and the biggest advantages of our original plan of rendering DPXRs was a single shot would have around 15 to 20 render elements. So since we had planned everything and rendered everything with deep, it became much of an ease to merge all these layers together after the renders were done in compositing. Additionally, we were also able to avoid a lot of re-rendering because we had set up the DPXR structure. We were able to surgically re-render and replace only specific elements as the things were getting updated throughout the shot. We also had more accurate depth of field and defocusing since the compositors were now having access to the deep data directly in the renders. And last but not least, we also use the open image denoiser, which ships with Arnold, which really helped us reduce the render time for final pixels, especially because it was a bright and sunny day, extremely harsh lighting scenario, and a lot of motion blur. So yeah, that was everything from our side, from lighting and rendering.
Awesome. Very impressive data management, and I think our strategy rendering in deep with with all those recipes really worked out, and yeah, took us to the final stage. So after hearing all of the processes, let's have a look at our breakdown. So you get a final glimpse of our behind the scenes. So I would like to take this chance to open the floor to for Q&A. If you have any questions, please type it into the chat or use the Q&A box down below in the toolbox, and we'll get it answered for you. Let's give it a minute. Carolina said, amazing work. Congratulations to all of you. All of you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carolina. Okay, if there's no other question, okay, there's one. I'd like to know what's the anim challenge transferring the layout from Maya to Houdini? Lynn?
I think you mean the main challenge, transferring the layout from Maya to Houdini, right? The anim, mostly the environment that you see here, that was done in Houdini as instancing setup. The layout part is really just the cameras. And then obviously you have the animation caches that go out of Maya to Houdini as alembics. It's not so much as a challenge than just a pipeline structure, really.
Cool. Next question. How difficult is it to for CFX artists to work in tandem with animation? Fernando, maybe you could start first from an animation perspective.
Yeah, from the animation side, we usually do of course, a first pass of animation, and we send it to them, and then we listen what they need. And sometimes the sculpting is very straightforward. We deliver them with the best poses we can, so they can use those poses. So we don't mess too much with the meshes and the geo. And for grooming, we have back and forth for this horse for the tail. Like the tail is based on an internal structure that the real horses have, and then we have the hair, of course. And for the run cycle and for the falling, the hair was not responding as we like it. So we had to do some tests with internal structure, which was made by animation, and until we get the final result as we wanted. But all I can say is we have to animation, we have to send them what we think is the best, and then we start to listen and work together from them.
I think on the other side, on on the CFX side, one of the benefits of us doing a full run cycle first is we were able to then create sort of like a template for CFX artists to start setting up how the simulation will react, so setting up the constraint, the physical behavior. So even if we change the animation afterwards, the animation still more or less fall into the same framework. So it actually helps the CFX artists to get a shot done faster because by the time we already have kind of like a rough framework of the simulation constraints set up. So yeah, it's actually better to work in tandem in this particular scenario, I would say. Cool. Olivia said, I work in a different field than VFX, but I always hear that VFX timelines are the tightest in our field. How much time do the animators get to work on the iterations before you have to go to final pass?
Yeah, this is actually, we don't finish the work in animation before sending to other departments, right? And we didn't wait for the model and the rig for the final horse to be ready to start working on. So we started with this rig that we had in WeFX, which was a different rig, a different model. And if I well remember, I worked around a month to get a nice run cycle and a nice fall. And then we started to overlap the departments. At that time, I had the final rig and we had the shots, and the animation that was done of the rig, of the running and the fall, had to be adjusted, shifted, and adjusted because of the camera's position. Like we had this close-up shot showing the horse face, the fall, the final shot of the fall where the horse's light is on the ground until rolls and stops. It passes right close to camera, so we had to adjust a lot of stuff on that shot as well. And when we have a nice animation to send to other departments, we keep working on it actually. Other departments have they have demands, they have things to fix, have things to adjust, and there's always room to improve, to make better. Like when we had the last shot, the camera position when the horse passes by the camera, it was a nice shot to show the violence, the size of the horse, the shock wave of things happening on the horse body, like the legs up and then rolling and things bouncing around, you know. So even when we sent to other departments, like lighting started their tests really early, and they are always updating. Sometimes lighting doesn't change anything, but they get a new horse animation, so they have to render again. So it's a work that I can say animation working until the very last week doing updates.
And I can say from the production standpoint, we say initially we had 3 months to work on this. That was actually true. We really did finish this in about 3.5 months. After that point, we were working on different shots, new shots, but the work for this main batch was done from asset through final render and compositing in about 3.5 months.
Cool. A follow-up question on this. How long has this team, us, been working with each other? It sounds like everyone was precisely in sync with each other. Steve, you have any numbers or any clue? It feels like forever.
Does feel like forever. It feels like forever and no time at all. I mean, the studio has only been around for 5 years, right? So our timeline is relatively tight. Even the longest tenured employees here, but many of us have been working together in the industry for longer than that. As a studio formed, it was formed by bringing a bunch of folks who had worked together previously at other studios together here. So while some folks are newer than others, I think the infrastructure here is based on a bunch of people who've worked together for longer than the company's existed, maybe more years than anyone would care to say. So I think, yeah, like I don't know. I do think that, as everyone's kind of said, communication and the ability to work between departments is one of the best things about us. And we're a boutique studio still, right? So we have to remember that, at any given moment, I think the biggest we ever were around 150 people I think when we were doing this work, we were around 90 people or 100 people in house total, but it was touched by 50 of them who worked on this particular sequence. So by being this size, it allows us to be extremely communicative, not siloed, and collaborative throughout the process, which makes this doable.
Yeah, I would definitely want to add to that. Like the collaboration in this team is very unique. Like uniquely well. Like we have a very good level of communication and collaborations, and this is kind of the spirit of this team. So we're really proud of it. So next question: can you go into any detail about the specifics of the rig used for the horse? And were there any deformation issue that you had to overcome for the horse? I'm gonna pass this to Fernando, but I'm gonna give you a spoiler. Yes, there will be some deformations issue, but Fernando, let's let you answer that.
Yeah, so the rig was based on a basic rig for a quadruped. We added a few different things, like we had hip adjustment, and we had also controllers from the, I would call front hip. It's like the shoulders area. And we were in sync all the time with the rigger. He is a fantastic rigger. He added everything that we needed. And on the deformation side, what I can say from animation, we definitely had some poses that we need some help that we could not figure out in animation. So we worked with a few blend shapes and also additional controllers from the rigger to sort out everything that we need considering the meshes. One thing that is good to say also is after animation is done, we do our best work, but we send to sculpting. So sculpting was the department responsible for making some very specific poses that the rig and the animators cannot reach, like for muscles, like for shapes for the neck, shapes for the chest. There are some muscles shapes that we can't reach. So Sculpt did a great job on this as well.
Cool. I think that this partially answered the next question. So for animation, when it comes to animating muscle structures, are you animating the muscles by hand in Maya, or does this area sometimes fall into the effects category in Houdini? I can answer that for you. So we do have a proprietary muscle control system in our rig. So Fernando and his team were able to actually animate most of the muscle structure as a base primary shapes. And then, as Fernando said, it get passed on to dynamics in Houdini, and at the same time also passed to a sculpting department to do fine tuning and detailing. Polygon count for the horse. That's a very interesting question.
I don't have the number, but it's going to be, remember, like it's all being displaced and subdivided at render time. So the level of subdivision had to be really, really high to get all the little veins that you see and the little folds and stuff. Like there's a lot of kind of small detail that is in there. But yeah, it was a heavy asset for sure.
It's a heavy asset. Like and our creature team do not shy on putting more polys on their sculpts. So
Yeah,
hopefully
it's
that
good to say quickly that we had different levels of geo details. Like in animation, we didn't use the final model. It was the same model, of course, same proportion, same everything, but low poly considering the final one.
relatively low poly. Right. Let's see if there's more questions.
Todd posted one in the chat here just about how much this costs. I'm just going to jump in quickly. Without giving you the number that it cost, I will say that we bid work based on shot count. There's no flat fee per shot. Everything is bid on, we bid for the cost of the asset build. and then we bid for the cost of the shot work. And we do that on a case-by-case basis, basically. So that's how we handle this here. That's how we handle bidding for everything.
Cool. If there's no more questions, I'm gonna hand this back to Lucas. Oh, there's one more. Shot sculpt process is after animation or tissue sim. I know sometimes Houdini Vellum is not so precise than Ziva or other solver. Yes, so shot sculpt tends to happen after everything. So it will be the final gatekeeping and final cleanup and touch-ups before rendering. How long did it take to render each frame, Vidu?
So surprisingly, it wasn't too bad. I think the beauty process were around 40-ish minutes a frame. Yeah, it's around 40 minutes to an hour a frame. We use the Arnold CPU rendering for this.
Does Deep make it more expensive?
It doesn't make it, I mean, it does add on like maybe 10 to 20% of the time, and it's mainly also because of how big the file actually gets. Deep mainly makes it more on the file disk size and file IO size.
On the IO side. Yeah.
File IO, so yeah. So
I will say that where we actually see the big effect on deep rendering is in rendering our composites, like our comp renders. Generally, a comp render is 40 seconds to 2 minutes. A comp render for this was going to be more like 6 to 12 minutes per frame. So it was a huge impact on our comp renders, which they didn't love. But on the other hand, it was worth it overall. So, you know, we sort of took the hit in the comp renders.
Cool.
Back to you, Lucas.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for those really insightful, amazing questions. And also a big thank you for the team at WeFX for joining us today. I think it was a really great presentation, and I hope that everyone here learned a bit more about what went into the series. So thank you all so much for joining.